Well, thank you for coming tonight. We've been doing these initiation rites up at Ghost Ranch now for 7 years, 8 years. We just finished one in England a couple weeks ago. So I think there's probably 1,200 to 1,400 men, including the ones from other countries, who've now gone through this experience of initiation. And as some of you know, I've been trying to write a book on it. It's been sent to the publisher. They promise it'll be out at this time next year. And in those studies, one of the things that kept returning was this notion that there's supposed to be a clear before and after. And if there isn't a clear before and after, you haven't been initiated. It hasn't taken, as it were. It's sort of like our Catholic understanding of the sacraments. Once you did it, you couldn't do it again, with things like baptism at least, because you were supposed to be changed. In some of the books I read, now these were differing cultures, but the old self was so considered changed or gone or over that old debts didn't apply anymore, which would be rather nice, I guess. You were a different person. Huh? In some places, even your marriage vows were null and void, and you had to do them again. Probably some people use that as an opportunity not to do them again. But the point is, they really thought this is a new person. We almost can't even think that way. We tend to attend events more as consumer objects, consumer products. Almost everything is an event for our own enrichment, but we don't even expect it to maybe change us in any essential way or transformational way. But that's precisely what initiation is supposed to be. And I think we'd say, those of us who've worked with it, and the letters we get, I still have a box at home of the letters each year of men who say it changed their life. And yet, I've been also surprised at these very men who say it changed their life. They'll never be the same. And I think they're sincere. I believe them. They usually don't necessarily invite other men to do the same, which has always somewhat surprised me. Even though I agree with what AA says, you're probably familiar with it. They say that Alcoholics Anonymous is supposed to proceed not by promotion, but by attraction. And I guess that would be my fondest hope, that men who have gone through the rites of passage, that there would be a qualitatively different kind of person here, a qualitatively different kind of man here, that would attract questions, or why are you different, or why are you happy, or why don't things make you angry like they do the rest of us? And I presume, and I hope that's true. But I guess because so many men say, well, what should I do now? Stephen encouraged me to make this short video to try to address that in a simple way. Let me give you, first of all, a probably grand example, but it's worth giving because it's true. There was an Irish-American man, Mike Kelly, from California, who attended at Ghost Ranch in the early years. And for those of you who know or who've made the rites, at the very last day, I remind the men that this is a privilege, what they've just experienced, and that many other people are never going to get to go through what they've just gone through. And I said it's a luxury to have this kind of freedom, this many days, to be in this beautiful place and hopefully hear this essential message and go through these powerful rituals. And I said, but you've got to know this is not just for you. If you experience this, it is now an obligation and a responsibility. You've got to do something for other men. Well, good Irish Catholic that he was, he took it dead serious. Mike, I think you'd say, is a very ordinary man's man. But he went back to California and came up with the idea of helping the men at Folsom Prison. I went there about 1.5 years ago, and today at Folsom Prison, there's the most successful recuperation program in the history of the prison. And it was all due, everybody would admit, to the initiative of this one man who made the rites of passage. He started teaching them something that would seem harmless and useless, maybe to prisoners, centering prayer. And he has 250 men gathering. And I was able to attend this. These rapists and murderers sitting in this circle in total silence. And what they're realizing in the prison is that's the one thing no one has addressed. Usually we bring in more words, more ideas, more concepts, heavy Christianity, and it just makes the mind that's already destroyed whirl around even quicker. But the idea of to stop thinking and to clean the lens, no one's thought of in a prison, and no one thought any prisoner would be attracted to it. It is the most successful program in the country right now. It's being asked for in all of the other California prisons. And it was started by one of our men who attended the rites of passage. Now, I'm not saying you're all supposed to do that. I think the more common thing have just been men who go back to Akron or Tallahassee and, form a men's group. In many cases, they've worked with boys at risk. Some work with just boys who already have made mistakes, some who they're afraid might make mistakes, and some just work with their church groups. And I don't want to say what you should do. I don't think I really know, because there isn't one plan. It's more that you've got to find out who you are, what your gift is. And maybe that's been said to you many times, but we've been surprised how hard that is for most men to really assess honestly who they are in terms of what their gift is. And unfortunately, I don't know if this goes with hearing preachers so much or whatever, so many assume that they're called to do what I'm doing. They're called to teach or be a preacher or something like that. And I wouldn't assume that that's the case. I don't think that's normally our style. But to at least share honestly, truthfully, from some place of depth, what we have experienced, that I hope men are free to do. Initiation in my studies is called the oldest system of spiritual instruction known on this earth. It preceded every temple, every synagogue, every church. This is the way all primal cultures passed on spiritual wisdom to the next generation. And they did what we haven't so successfully done in the church. We were told, for those of you raised in the church, baptism washed away original sin. We all accepted that as some kind of theoretical truth. You didn't see it empirically, that there was anything different before and after. But what cultures tried to do was really remake every generation of men. So you wouldn't be carrying all of the garbage, all of the unlived life from your father and your grandfather and your ancestors, but everybody could get a fresh start. Now that fresh start again became this new life. And our hope is that first of all, you'd be able to sustain that by some kind of spiritual practice. It just isn't going to happen any other way. Events finally, in my experience, events finally don't change people. As high as they must be, and I've been given retreats around the world for 33 years. And events are exactly that. They're events. But until you somehow find a new way of being present in the world, it's a new presence that you are capable of, nothing really lasts. It doesn't, brothers, and you know that. I have been a part of too many highs myself, either on the giving end or the receiving end. And to just give people any kind of emotional high doesn't work. So you've got to find some spiritual practice that allows you to be this new man, this new being, not just a new doing, but some kind of new being. In the studies that I was exposed to, it said historically the young initiate was always sent from a community of men and returned back to a community of men. That doesn't apply anymore because we've lost the whole tradition. So those of you who have been initiated, you probably came on your own, in many cases with a wife pushing you, or in some cases a wife resisting you going to this male thing. But certainly you didn't have, for the most part, a group to return to. So what this has done is left you all on your own. And I think that's why there hasn't been a lot of carry-through. There hasn't been a lot of follow-up, even with the best of intentions. So that's why I'd say you've got to find a personal spiritual discipline. Maybe it's solitude, silence, spiritual reading, daily journaling, or at least a couple times a week. Something that allows you to focus again. Because otherwise, it isn't going to happen. I can tell you that. It isn't going to happen. You've got to find something, or you become just a part of the conveyor belt that everybody else is on. This media is just controlling us. I don't mean maliciously, it's just that it's everywhere. And you take on the groupthink of the culture very, very quickly. We talk about being exposed to an alternative world, but very quickly you're pulled back into business as usual. Now, I don't want to say that you all got to belong to a men's group. But you wonder, why did this phenomenon? Maybe all of us have our horror stories with church, but why did this phenomenon of church emerge so universally? We were just teaching in England for several weeks, and it was mentioned there that John Wesley was asked this same question. He's the founder of the Methodists. Why the church? And he gave what I think was a very good metaphor. He said, if you have a burning fire and you remove one ember from the fire, even a foot away, in a very short time it will lose all of its heat. And he said, that's my answer to why we need something like a social collective. And I don't think we believe that anymore. I mean, Alcoholics Anonymous does, and that's why they're so successful. But most American spirituality has become gross individualism. Everybody thinking that we can do it by ourselves. And I just don't see many examples of that. That you can pull it inside of your little brain and just keep tossing around inside of there. So I'm just saying you need some kind of support system, some kind of reality check, some kind of people you can share with. You don't need to call it church. I would presume you wouldn't. Most of our men just call it their men's group. But I'd say just someplace where you can go deeper, that's all. Where you can talk about something beyond sports and the weather and the safe conversation that most of us are forced to talk about. I believe that an initiated man is essentially somehow what some have called a generative man. He uses his power, his life for others and not just for himself. Now I know every one of us in this room believes that in our heads. We all want to be generative men and give our lives somehow for others. I know I can say, I think very honestly at this point in my life, the people I've met who I'd call happy people have always found some way to serve. They always have. It's like that's where our energy flows, that it has to be given away. And if it isn't flowing from you towards some causes, suffering, issues, people, concerns outside of yourself, frankly, we just rattle around inside of our own head, asking ourselves moment by moment whether we're happy or are we happy enough or whatever. And of course, we aren't. We'll always find reasons why we're not. So I would like to hope, and maybe this is presumptuous, but I don't think so, that somehow initiated men can regain the spiritual authority. And I mean that in a good way. I don't mean authoritarianism. I mean authority. That the Jewish man still has in the Jewish religion, the Islamic man still has in the Islamic religion. But by and large in the Christian religion, and I take blame for this, I guess, in the name of my fellow clergymen, I think we overdid the clergy thing in the Christian churches. This huge distinction between clergy and laymen. And we were the experts, and we had all the education, all the knowledge, at least you thought we did, or were told that we did. And what happened over the centuries is that by and large, you pretty much, I mean, structurally there was no other way, you pretty much abdicated any even expectation that you could have spiritual authority, that you could know what you were talking about, that you could trust your own experience, that you might just be right, that you don't have to run to Father or the minister for all of your spiritual questions. And again, I'm not trying to make you back into individualists, but I am trying to say that males have to rediscover their own spiritual authority. And the only way that authority emerges is by inner experience over a period of time. You can't get it by reading a book. You can't get it by even, we now know, by going through a seminary, or even by hands being laid on you and being called a priest. We know that none of those of themselves gives you authority. And authority, as far as my definition goes, is the ability to author other people, to author events. And what I mean is to call them forth, to birth them, to generate them, to give life to them. So each of you is going to have to find, I think, what that is. And don't look for the heroic thing. Don't look for the flashy thing. Spend some time really asking, what is it that is my gift? How is it that God can move through me in effective ways? And for the most part, it's going to be some form of servanthood. I know the men in Bend are starting their rite of passage in a few days, and there's just a whole group of guys, some of them very well educated. One of them, we know, is a college president. They come and they wash dishes for the whole weekend for the men. Now, just that witness of college-educated men coming and washing dishes for a whole group of 100 other men and doing it with joy is the most unbelievable witness to these guys. Something has happened. These are not business as usual men. These are a different kind of men. So what I'm saying, brothers, it really isn't what you do. It is how you do it. It's the energy that you do things with. I was just traveling, as I keep mentioning, with Stephen and Mary Jo and their little baby in Europe for the past month, and so I got to observe a little one at greater length. And any of you fathers know this already. It's not necessarily what you say to a little child, but the enthusiasm you say it with. And if you say something juiced and you say it excited, the little one-year-old immediately knows it's important and picks up Daddy's enthusiasm. Daddy's saying something big is going to happen, and she can tell it in his voice. You know that, any of you who are fathers. It's not even, I've been telling a lot of parents, going to church or not going to church. If you go to church and yourself are bored to death, and they can tell you don't believe a word of it, it would honestly be better for you not to go, because you're giving them a negative message. Basically, people are juiced about what you're juiced about. And I can't create that juice. I know the initiation rite seems to leave man awfully juiced at that point. But the question we're asking here is, how do you sustain it? And as you're hearing, I really don't have any magic answer. But I do think that it's important that we ask that question. How can we sustain something this good? And how can we hand over something this good? Some of you know that the 12th step of the 12-step program is precisely that you have to give it away. And I know myself as a preacher, I usually, as you can probably tell now, I don't know what I'm going to say till I stand up. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I know that over the years, I tend to rediscover the gospel as I'm preaching it to other people. There's some dynamism there. It's like, oh, I said that, now I've got to believe it myself, and I know it's true, but in the saying of it, you rediscover it. That's my point. And I think that's true for men's work. I think somehow there has to be a nephew, a godson, a grandson, a son, a young man at work. It doesn't have to be inferior in age, just another man at work, or even an older man. That in the describing of whatever it is that you experienced, I think you're going to reappreciate it and rediscover it yourself. So in this, when I issued the book to my publisher before I left a month ago, he told me something from the publishing world that struck me as rather interesting. He said, what all the publishing houses are saying is that people want spirituality with spine. That they feel in the last 10 years, so much that's been put out in the spiritual market in America is what they call fluff. That it's sweet, it's maybe true, it's okay, but it's sort of forgettable. It doesn't change your life. I think one thing we all know is that the rites of passage is not fluff. And it's not easily forgettable. In fact, if you forget it, you almost have to try. Or you weren't there when it happened. There hasn't been a before and an after. I know I've had, brothers, many wonderful spiritual moments in my life where I've thought to myself, God, this is so real. This is so good. Don't ever let me forget it, Lord. Don't ever let me forget it. I know I'll never be that way again. And within 3 days, in 3 days, the images of the system, whatever they might be, of the normal commerce and talk and chatter that I'm a part of, takes over, and that enormously rich experience is gone. So find your spiritual discipline, find somebody you can talk to at a deeper level. Find what it is in you that has changed and that might just be your gift. And know that in the giving away of that gift, and I mean that in all seriousness, I think you discover it yourself. It's almost the mystery of Trinity. If our very image of God is perfect giving and perfect receiving, and that is who God is, there's something in the very chemistry of how we're created that only in the giving away of what we think we have do we have it at all. And I really believe that's true. I can't prove that to you logically. I can't prove that to you mathematically. But in terms of the chemistry of the soul, I know it's true. And if we try to hoard it or just figure it out inside of our head, we always lose it. So those of you who were initiated, you remember how much time we emphasize sending you into silence and sending you out into the desert absolutely alone. There's many things, brothers, you can do with your head, but you can't be present through your head. Please believe me on that. All right? You can't. You cannot be present through your mind. Whenever you're in your mind, you're in your mind. You're not present. Now, we've all been trained to be in our minds. We call it being educated. We think of ourselves as even superior if we've got a good mind or a good education. But if initiation really takes, it's a different quality of presence. Because hopefully you've been introduced to what we call the true self. And the true self is not the self of image or reputation or good looks or good body or any of that. And that's the self that, as true as it is, we keep disbelieving it. We keep running from the one thing we want and the one thing that gives us peace. We use that expression in English, peace of mind. But I often say it's a contradiction in terms, because whenever you're at peace, you're not in your mind. I know some of you are not believing me on that, but think about it. It's true. Whenever you're at peace, you're not in your mind. And whenever you're in your mind, you are not at peace. And everything all day wants to pull you into that mind to think things, figure them out, explain them, judge them, critique them, seek advancement for yourself in one way or another. I think that's exactly the way an initiated man should not live. That means he's lost that immense presence that initiation always gives us. It happened in England a few weeks ago at the end of Initiation Day. We saw all these men coming in from the English forest, and we didn't have to mandate silence. They all just had this quiet, serene smile on their face. And it lasted till late into the evening. Just you know that they've encountered a way to be present to what is. And that, for me, is the primary responsibility of an initiated man. I don't live it always myself, but I know it's when I live there that I really live. And I know that kind of participation in the world is the only thing that's really going to change the world. And I think an initiated man is going to live in the world not just spiritually differently, not just culturally with a different set of eyes, but I think his politics and his economics are going to change from that kind of presence. The questions of power and warfare and domination just are seen through an entirely different lens. But without that presence, you'll pretty much slip back into the way everybody else thinks and the way the newspapers every day tell us to think. So they always say, and I know it's a cliche, that you can give a person a fish and you'll relieve their hunger for one day, or you can teach them how to fish and you've relieved their hunger for a lifetime. I hope what initiation did for all of you was teach you how to fish for the real life that is already here and totally surrounding us, but for some reason no one has told us. Initiation told you that was true, and thank God you experienced it. But brothers, don't lose it, or you've lost, I think, the central gift that you have to give your brothers, your family, and the world that we're a part of.